Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I am your host, Kia, and today I am riding solo for two reasons, one of which I will share later. But the first is because I wanted to break down or just talk a little bit more about something that came up in a recent episode. It was Liz Lapp's episode, to be specific, where she questioned her worth when she was laid off from her job. Now, spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to or watched this episode yet, she knew at least a year before being laid off that it was time for her to go, particularly for mental health reasons, but she was not trusting her own voice. She was not trusting her intuition. And so she stayed. And once she was laid off, it really caused her to question her worth. She actually said in the interview, "What is my worth now?" And that has stuck with me since that conversation. Um, it has stuck with many of you. I've heard from several people indicating that this really spoke to them. And so I just wanted to break it down a little bit because there are so many ways that our worth is called into question, either by the outside world or from our own from our own internal voice and thought processes. And so, as I think about it, there are really kind of four ways in which, and these aren't the only ways, but there are four ways that came up for me, chiefly because I've experienced some of these things, and I'll go into them a little bit more deeply in a moment. But these are four of the ways that came up for me as to how our worth is questioned or comes into question. The first is obviously what Liz talked about, which is her questioning of her own worth came via a layoff. And I've been laid off. Um, one of which I was not expecting the layoff. The other, I knew it was coming, and I actually was glad that it happened. But the first one, it really took me by surprise. And similar to Liz, I remember thinking, now what am I going to do? Like, what happens? What happens now? And so that is one obvious way, one very typical way that one's worth is called into question because we spend so much of our time at work. And even though people are trying to undo this hustle and grind culture, especially with the way the world of work is changing dramatically now because of COVID, and people are just reassessing their work life, personal life integration anyway. And so there is this movement that is taking hold in terms of changing the way that we operate at work, the boundaries that we set for ourselves, etc. So, but that being said, while all of this is kind of underway and rebooting, it is still one of the chief ways that we are causing ourselves to question our worth is through a layoff. But another way that we question our worth is when we leave a job voluntarily. I remember when I left my a corporate job. Well, so it was a nonprofit that I worked at, and I remember leaving that job, and that job was wonderful. It was wonderful. I learned so much. I was able to do so much. I really was able to pave my own way. And also, I wanted to take an opportunity to really double down on starting or really going full time in my business. I had just been doing it as a side hustle up until that point. And even though I made the choice to leave, I still had a really hard time shedding that identity because I didn't know how else to call myself, right? I was the director of marketing and I didn't know how else to identify myself, even though I had been a coach for over a year at that point. And so that was one way that I was questioning my worth a little bit. Like, now what? I'm stepping into this new realm that I'm not as well versed in as my marketing career. I had a 20 plus year career in marketing, and that was so much of who I was. And when I stepped into this new realm of being an entrepreneur for the second time, but doing something completely different, then it was like, oh, now what? Like, I don't have the wins, I don't have the accolades, I don't have the accomplishments with this path that I had with my previous path. Even though so many of those wins and accomplishments and experiences brought me to that point. They made that path of being an entrepreneur, being a coach full time, they made that possible. And still, I discounted it because it didn't measure up to the marketing career. So that caused me to do a little questioning of my worth as well. But when I shared Liz's episode, I heard from other professionals who had left jobs voluntarily without having anything lined up. So, I knew what I was going to be doing when I left, but there are people who have left and didn't know what they were going to do. And people saw their move as very courageous, very brave, but they didn't see it that way. They saw it as like oh, now what? Now what am I going to do? So, which was very similar to my feeling. So that's another way that our worth gets called into question. The other one is when we get the rejections or the no's. And actually, this came up in my episode with Lauren McGoodwin, where we were just kind of joking about her bio and how when she hears her bio, is she ever like taken aback by it? And she was talking about how the highlight reel of her bio really, there's a whole resume of no's and rejections that came before the yeses. She talked about how she worked for 10 years to get that little soundbite of a bio together. And really, this is something that we so easily forget for people that we see in the spotlight who are doing amazing things, who seem to have a very accomplished career, that there are a lot of no's and a lot of rejections that come with the wins and the accomplishments. And I thought that was really wonderful that Lauren called that out, to just really normalize not winning, right? You can't win all the time, but those rejections, it's only a rejection if you stop. It's only a failure or a statement about your ability is if you stop. If you are like, well, I didn't get that, I must not be good enough, so I'm just going to go do something else. And I think about, as I talk about that, I think about something that happened to me shortly after I um, had gone full time in my business. And there was someone who was starting some initiative. I can't remember what she was doing, but she was starting some initiative. And someone who had been following me recommended me to her, which I thought was amazing because I wasn't really familiar with this person. So that felt like a huge blessing that this person had thought enough of me to recommend me to her. So I came with a cosign already. And this woman, as we were talking, like she seemed to really be vibing on what I was saying. Like she seemed to be in agreement. She thought that what I had to share was really powerful. And then we got down to the brass tacks because she had some baseline requirements for people to be involved in her initiative. And usually for things like that, they want you to have a certain amount of names in your mailing list. They want you to have a certain amount of followers on social media. And what I had then did not measure up to worthiness to be a part of her initiative. But in the moment that and I was very, upfront. I didn't try to hide anything. I was like, in full transparency, I don't have the followers. I don't have the number of names in the email list that you require to be a part of this. But, I'm really excited about what you're doing. I believe in what you're doing. And this could be a great opportunity for me, and I think I would have a lot to add to what you're doing. And she didn't end the call then. Like she still seemed to be interested in having the conversation. And then she was like, okay, I'm going to follow up with you with next steps. And as you might imagine, that never came. That follow-up never came, and she completely ghosted me. And I mean, my assumption is that she ghosted me because I didn't have the vanity metrics, right? I didn't have the numbers that she was looking for. Now, I don't have proof of that, but I can only come to that conclusion because of how much in agreement she seemed to be with what I was sharing with my platform, what I stood by. She seemed to be in agreement with all of that, but then, the callback never came. So, so that was something that for a moment I was like, damn, well, that sucks. Like, how am I supposed to get those names if people aren't willing to take a chance, right? And and I understand, as a marketer, I understand that you want to have a certain level of quote guaranteed support for something for a partnership that you're engaging in. I get all that. So I think this all amounts to that I took it personally. um, but it was a learning experience for me. But just that, but that initial experience of being rejected because I didn't have certain a certain amount of followers, or I didn't have the vanity metrics that someone was looking for, that rejection for a brief moment caused me to be like, well, maybe I'm not enough, right, to be in this game. And I've had other situations that have come up, and there I've had rejections for similar reasons. But imagine if I had stopped because of that. I would not have this show. I wouldn't have gotten the amazing speaking engagements that I've had an opportunity to get. I wouldn't have been able to impact the clients that I've been able to impact. I wouldn't be offering and providing the trainings that I've been able to provide if I had stopped because of that one person that implied that I wasn't good enough to be part of their initiative because I didn't have the numbers that they wanted. So that's another way that our worth is called into question, is when you get the no's, when you get the rejections. But the other way, the fourth way that your worth could potentially be called into question, and I think this is more the way that we receive something and then incorporate it or internalize it, is the way that people react or respond to your presence. And of course, I have a story about this. This was about a week after I had gone full time in my business, and a colleague of mine was having a photo shoot. And she, knowing me, we were friends and had some interactions. And she had invited me to be one of the women in her photo shoot. And so I'm sitting there, getting ready to change clothes, get ready for the photo shoot. The photographer was just kind of like getting everything set up. And another entrepreneur who I had just had a conversation with literally a couple days prior. I seem to recall us going to lunch. Um, but we had spent a significant amount of time together where I was sharing about my business, sharing what I was doing. And again, we seemed to connect on a number of levels. And she walked in the photo shoot and she saw me and she was like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" I kid you not. She said it just like that. And in that moment, I was like, wow. So even though we just had a huge moment of connection, you still um, you know, were taken aback by the fact that I was at this photo shoot with other entrepreneurs who are doing, amazing things, who are friends with this individual, etc. So, you know, as you're taking in this message, you might be thinking that I took this personally, that, I'm reading too much in the situation. And I could be. But the point I'm wanting to make here is that the way people respond to you, um, and the way that you internalize it based on where you are all signs of your worth being taken into question, whether by yourself, the way that you're thinking about yourself and your status in the world or in the culture, or in the business that you're running, or in your corporate job, but also the way that people view you as a result of you being visible, how much you're out there, using a lot of air quotes right now. And these are all ways that people's worth gets called into question. And really, that interaction with that woman who said that to me, it didn't make me shrink. In fact, it made me push harder. It made me think, "Oh, I'm going to show you." And in fact, that reminds me of something that came up in Micah Field's interview, where when he told a family member that he was going to start his catering business, and this family member said that they didn't think that he was ready, and he took on the attitude of, "Oh, okay, I'm going to show you." And so that was kind of the attitude that I had, was, "Oh, you think this is playtime, right?" And so it really was just that perceived shade that was thrown my way. I really used that as a motivator. So again, imagine if I had taken that comment, or the tone of her, kind of scoffing at my presence at this photo shoot. Um, Imagine if I had taken that and let that deter me from the years now that I have under my belt of doing this work and learning and growing and evolving my business. Um, I, Looking back, that would have been devastating if I had stopped and let that perceived slight. And again, I take ownership. I take ownership that I may have read into it, um, but it's my experience. So take that as it will. But again, there are so many ways that our worth can be called into question. And really, I wanted to take this opportunity to invite you to really take a step back, really take a step back and do your own inventory. Do your own inventory of the wins that you have, what you're proud of yourself for, what you have overcome, and really embrace those things. Embrace what you have gone through to get to where you are. Sometimes clients will, when they're applying for jobs, and these are clients who will have a full resume of accomplishments. They will have a full resume of really solid experience. And then when they go to interview, and they're being invited to these interviews, right? Like, it's not like they're, making it up. They're being invited to these interviews and to come back for multiple interviews. And still, they are calling into question, am I good enough for this job? Can I do it? Will I be able to succeed? And the thing that I like to remind people, which I want to remind you of, is that your skills and experiences, you didn't just drop out of the sky to go into that interview, to go into that opportunity, um, to share your insights and to share your knowledge. You didn't just, appear out of thin air. You had a whole, series of years and trials and tribulations to get to that point. You have learned so much, you have done so much, you've overcome so much. And we forget that. We forget it because we are a culture, in America. We are very much in a culture of, you finish one thing and it's time for you to skyrocket to the next thing. And we don't take enough time to acknowledge what allowed us to overcome in that moment, what allowed us to get that achievement that we've gotten. So this is my personal invitation to you to really take some time to acknowledge, look at your accomplishments and what allowed you to get those accomplishments. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. Sure, there may have been some, you know, synchronicity that allowed all of these pieces to come together, but you still had to deliver. You still had to show up and share your knowledge, share your experience, use what you have learned when you've overcome problems, when you've solved problems in the past to apply to this particular situation. So none of this is, you know, fake. So again, just inviting you to take this moment to acknowledge what you have done and what has allowed you to get you to where you are at this moment in your life, in your career, in your business, whatever it is, what has allowed you to get to this point. But this is also your courage permission slip to keep showing up. This is your permission slip to have the audacity to keep trying, to keep moving forward in the face of rejection, in the face of the no's, in the face of people scoffing at you, or even the possibility of people scoffing at you and judging you. You know, that is one of the definitions of courage, is that you are making a deliberate choice in the face of painful or fearful circumstances in pursuit of a worthy goal. And sometimes that means that there are going to be that you are going to have an unpopular opinion, that someone is not going to appreciate the work that you've done. You may get judged, there may be blowback, but if if it feels right for you, and you have heard countless guests on this show talk about how they had to do what felt right for them, what their inside voice was telling them that they had to do, or else. So just reminding yourself that these things are going to come. You can never do anything perfectly right. But if it's right for you, then, and if it's something that's important to you, then you have to have the audacity to keep moving forward despite what other people may say, what they may think of you, etc., because it's not their life. It's yours. They're not paying your bills. They're not experiencing whatever circumstances in your life you're experiencing. You have to deal with that. And so, what other people think of you can't be more important than what it is that you are trying to achieve, create, bring into your life, bring into your career. And it's important to remember that your resume, your lived experiences, and your triumphs have earned you a seat at the table, or at the very least, or even more, have earned you to the right to build your own goddamn table. If no one else wants to give it to you, don't sit back and wait for someone to notice you. Take the reins and do it yourself. And I think I mentioned that in the very first episode when I was introducing this show, is that I had a vision that I wanted to be a speaker, and that I had the idea to have a show many, many years ago. And there were people that told me I wasn't ready, it wasn't time. And I was like, okay, well, no one's going to give this to me. So I'm going to have to do it myself. And so that's what I'm doing. And now, I have several episodes under my belt, and I haven't died. No one has, no one has said you suck. You may be thinking it, but no one has said that. And even if you did think it, that's your opinion, right? I'm not for everybody, and you're not for everyone either. So build your own table, or at least own the fact that you deserve a seat at any table because of what you have lived through, what you have triumphed over, what you have done and accomplished in your life or career, etc. So I leave that with you here as we close out this episode. And as I teased at the top, the other reason why I am flying solo on this particular episode is because we are taking a little break. We are getting into the holiday season. And it is, I want to practice what I preach when I'm talking to the people that I'm training in leadership trainings, people that I'm coaching, when I speak at events, to really give yourself permission to take a step back. And so that's what I'm doing. And I want to give you the permission, if you feel like you need it, to take a time out, to be present during this holiday season. We're getting to the end of the year. It's amazing that we're even at this point. And 2021 has been a hard year, not in the way that 2020 was, but it's been a lot of starts and stops. We're still trying to figure things out. We're still trying to navigate through COVID and how to live our lives safely, but still not want to, um, you know, shortchange our lives. And so there has just been a lot of uncertainty still, and it's kind of exhausting. It's exhausting, and so I just want to acknowledge that and honor that for myself. I personally have gone through a number of transitions over the last several months, so I'm honoring that for myself. I love doing this show, and I know that I need to give myself a little bit of a break to replenish, to reset my own self, and to also um, bring the car down to zero, because I've been going 100 plus miles an hour this entire year. So I hope that you will take the opportunity to do the same for you and for your family this holiday season. And we will be back in 2022 with more interviews. Um, which I'm really excited about, some of the people that are on the slate for this next batch of interviews. I'm not going to say it's a season, because this isn't really like a season finale or anything like that, but really, really excited about the conversations that are going to be coming your way in 2022. So with that, I will close this episode of Courage Permission Slip. Thank you so much for all the beautiful messages that you have shared, the feedback, constructive feedback, and also really positive feedback that I have received from so many of you. And I'm just so thankful to you for listening along or watching over these last 2 months. Ooh, it's been 2 months. So I just want to express my gratitude to you for listening, and for rating and sharing and reviewing and all of those things. So with that, I will officially close. Thank you. I wish you a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year. And we will be back in 2022, and take this break to get caught up on or re-listen to the episodes that have really resonated with you. So until the next time, take this moment to make your goals and your vision and your dreams more important than your fears. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.